Officer Rohan had been on duty since the early afternoon. The long stretch of highway in front of him looked quiet as usual. It was the kind of calm road where nothing surprising happened. The sun had already gone down, leaving a soft glow behind the distant hills. And the streetlights along the road began to turn on one by one. Rohan drove at a steady pace, thinking about how peaceful the night felt. Most drivers were careful on this road, and no one seemed to be in a hurry. He expected the rest of his shift to pass in the same slow, steady way. Then something unusual happened. A black hearse appeared in his side mirror. It was not just driving past him. It was speeding at a rate that made no sense for such a vehicle. A hearse was normally slow, respectful, and steady. This one moved like someone had pressed down on the gas pedal without thinking. Rohan blinked, wondering if he had seen correctly. The hearse rushed forward, the tires gripping the road as if the driver wanted to outrun the wind. Rohan glanced at his speed meter and noticed how quickly the vehicle was gaining distance. He felt a wave of surprise rise inside him. Hearses were meant for calm travel, usually carrying a coffin for a quiet final journey. Seeing one flying across the road at high speed was rare, strange, and instantly concerning. Rohan straightened in his seat and turned on his patrol lights. Red and blue reflections flashed across the empty road as he pressed the accelerator and followed the hearse. The chase was not dramatic like in the movies. It was strange in a way that made Rohan uneasy. The hearse did not weave through heavy traffic or try to escape into unknown paths. There were barely any other vehicles at that hour. Instead, the hearse sped straight down the highway, as if the driver had an urgent reason to get somewhere but did not want to deal with questions. Every few seconds, the hearse swayed slightly to one side, then corrected itself. It was not enough to count as dangerous driving, but it was enough for Rohan to sense that the driver was nervous. As he followed the hearse, his mind filled with possibilities. Maybe the driver was tired. Maybe someone at the funeral home was inexperienced with the vehicle. Or maybe something else was going on. Rohan had been trained to trust his instincts. Right now, his instincts told him that something about this scene did not add up. The calm night air around him seemed to tighten as if the road itself sensed that. Something unusual was unfolding. He picked up his radio and informed the station that he was pulling over a speeding hearse. The person on the other end paused before answering. Even the station staff seemed surprised by the report. Rohan continued driving behind the hearse, which showed no intention of slowing down. The engine of his patrol car hummed louder as he increased his speed to keep up. A minute later, the hearse finally slowed. It did so gradually, almost reluctantly, as if the driver had been debating whether to stop or continue. The tires rolled onto the gravel at the side of the road, and small stones scattered as the vehicle finally came to a complete halt. Rohan parked a short distance behind it, letting the engine settle before stepping out. The cool night air brushed against his face as he adjusted his belt and walked forward. He approached the hearse with steady steps. The back windows were tinted, giving no clue about what was inside. The driver's windows slowly lowered, and a man leaned slightly out. He looked young, maybe in his late 20s, with a thin face and eyes that seemed unsure where to look. His name, as Rohan would soon learn, was Amir. Rohan kept his tone calm and polite. He asked why Amir had been driving so fast. Amir opened his mouth to answer, but the words did not come easily. He spoke slowly, stopping and starting, and none of his explanations sounded clear. Rohan noticed that Amir kept glancing toward the back of the hearse. Each time he did, his shoulders tightened just a little. It was a small detail, but it stood out sharply in the quiet night. Rohan could sense that Amir was worried, even afraid of something, though he did not seem afraid of Rohan himself. It was more like he was afraid of something behind him, something he did not want to explain. The air around them felt heavier with each passing moment. Rohan continued asking simple questions. Was he tired? Was there an emergency? Was he in control of the vehicle? Amir kept shaking his head, trying to give simple replies, but his eyes kept drifting back toward the rear of the hearse. Rohan felt his own focus turn toward that same area. The back of the vehicle sat in silence, dark and still. What something about it made the officer feel alert. He tried to maintain a calm presence. He had been in many unusual situations during his years on duty, and he knew that staying steady helped others do the same. But something tugged at him, something invisible but real. The way the hearse had sped down the road. The way Amir hesitated in every reply. The way he looked toward the coffin again and again. These small details formed a pattern that Rohan could not ignore. Rohan stepped closer to the rear of the hearse. He did not touch it yet. He simply stood near it and listened. The gentle sound of wind passed across the silent road. A soft hum came from the engine as it cooled down. Everything seemed normal, but Rohan could not shake the idea that something inside the vehicle was not normal at all. Amir cleared his throat and said that everything was fine. He insisted that he was only in a hurry to return the hearse to the funeral home. He said the road was empty, so he thought speeding would not cause trouble. Rohan listened but did not accept the explanation fully. He knew the signs of someone hiding the full truth. Amir looked nervous in a way that did not match his words. Rohan asked if there was anything inside the hearse that he should know about. Amir hesitated. It was a long pause. Too long. Finally, Amir said that there was only a coffin, nothing else. His voice cracked slightly when he said it. Rohan noticed. At that moment, a small sound reached Rohan's ears. It was faint, very faint. It came from the direction of the coffin. He could not identify it, but it was real enough to make him focus on it. The sound lasted just a second, and then faded away, leaving the air silent again. Rohan looked at Amir. Amir's eyes widened, and his lips tightened into a thin line. He seemed to be silently hoping Rohan had not heard anything. He had Rohan felt his pulse quicken, but he stayed outwardly calm. He asked Amir what the sound was. Amir quickly said that he did not hear anything, but his voice trembled a little. Rohan could feel the tension between them grow thicker. The officer knew he had to check the back of the hearse. Something inside it needed attention. Something inside it was trying to be quiet, but had failed for a moment. Rohan told Amir that he would be opening the back. Amir froze. He did not protest, but his silence spoke louder than any refusal. Rohan stepped toward the rear doors. The metal surface felt cold under his hand as he reached for the handle. He could feel a slight shiver run through his fingers. He was not afraid, but he was alert in a way that sharpened every detail around him. The streetlight above cast a pale glow across the vehicle. The night was quiet. Too quiet. What was inside the coffin? Why had the hearse been speeding? Why was Amir so nervous? These questions filled Rohan's mind as he prepared to open the doors. He took one final breath and pulled the handle. Something inside was waiting for him. And he knew the quiet moment before the reveal was the most unsettling part of all. Rohan stood behind the hearse, his hand resting on the cold metal handle of the back door. The night felt still, as if even the air was waiting to see what would happen next. Before he opened it, he looked at Amir again. The young man's face had grown even paler, and his eyes seemed to hold a silent plea. It was not the plea of someone hiding something harmful. It was the plea of someone who feared the consequences of a mistake. Rohan had seen that kind of expression before, usually on people who got themselves trapped in a situation they did not understand. Amir stepped closer and tried to speak. His voice was soft and unsteady. He said he did not want trouble and that everything inside was fine. His words were simple, but they lacked confidence. Every time he said something, it sounded like he was trying to convince himself more than he was trying to convince Rohan. Rohan listened carefully. Years of experience had taught him that people often said more through their tone than their words. Amir's tone carried worry, confusion, and a hint of fear. Not fear of Rohan, but fear of what might happen when the truth came out. The back of the hearse stood silent, like a secret waiting in the dark. Rohan asked Amir again if there was anything inside he should know about. Amir took a slow breath and shook his head, but his eyes drifted downward, avoiding direct contact. That single movement told Rohan more than words ever could. The officer decided to give Amir a moment. Sometimes people revealed more when they were allowed space to breathe. Rohan stepped back slightly and observed the surroundings. The road stretched far into the night, with its long lines disappearing into distance. A soft wind brushed against the nearby trees, making their leaves whisper gently. The streetlight flickered above them, casting moving shadows on the ground. It was a quiet scene, yet the tension in the air made it feel heavy. Rohan asked Amir to step out of the way so he could open the back. Amir hesitated. It was a hesitation filled with worry, not defiance. Finally, he moved aside, lowering his head slightly as if he expected something uncomfortable to happen. Rohan nodded and pulled the door open. But instead of rushing to inspect the coffin immediately, he took slow, deliberate steps. He wanted to understand the entire situation before jumping to conclusions. The inside of the hearse looked neat. Clean walls, organized shelves for equipment, and a large coffin resting in the center. It was made of polished wood that reflected the streetlight faintly. Everything looked normal. Too normal, he thought. Rohan approached the coffin and placed his hand gently on the lid. The wood felt smooth, and the faint scent of varnish rose as he touched it. Amir watched closely, his breath shallow. Rohan sensed that the young man wanted to explain something but did not know how to begin. Before lifting the lid, Rohan turned to Amir and asked again if there was anything wrong. This time, Amir did not speak right away. He lifted his hands, rubbed his palms together nervously, and looked at the ground. Then he finally said that something unexpected had happened earlier in the evening. His voice was calm but shaky. Rohan encouraged him to continue. Amir explained that he worked for a small funeral home. Earlier that day, he had received a call from his manager to deliver the coffin to a private location. Amir said he had followed the instructions without asking questions because he trusted his workplace. But during the drive, he heard a soft sound coming from the back. At first, he thought it was the road. Later, he thought something inside the hearse had shifted. He told himself it was normal. But then the sound came again, clearer and unmistakable. Rohan listened with full attention. Amir's hands trembled slightly as he spoke. He said he became scared because he did not know what the sound meant. He was alone, driving at night, and panic began to grow inside him. He did not want to stop on the dark road, so he kept driving faster and faster, hoping to reach the funeral home as quickly as possible. He admitted he had not planned to break any rules. Fear simply took over. Rohan understood the young man's fear. He had met many people who made mistakes when stress clouded their judgment. He told Amir that being honest now was the most important thing. This reassurance seemed to calm Amir a little, though his eyes remained fixed on the coffin. Rohan turned back to it. He leaned his ear closer, trying to hear any sound. At first, there was nothing. Only the gentle wind outside. Then, just when Rohan thought he might have imagined it earlier, a faint tap reached his ear. It was so soft that someone standing farther away might have missed it entirely. But it was real. Amir's body stiffened when the sound came. Rohan looked at him, and Amir nodded slowly. It was the nod of someone confirming that he had not imagined things. Rohan placed both hands on the lid. He paused for a moment, giving himself time to prepare. There was no sense of danger, only mystery. Still, his heartbeat grew faster. As he lifted the lid inch by inch, the inside of the coffin was dark at first. The small amount of light from the street lamp outside entered slowly. Rohan leaned in, expecting to see something still, something quiet. But there was movement. He spotted a shape shifting softly. Before he could react fully, Amir spoke quickly. He said he wanted to explain first. Rohan waited, still holding the lid open. Amir said that earlier. When he had picked up the coffin, someone had told him that everything inside was prepared and he did not need to check anything. He had trusted them. He was not allowed to open the coffin without permission. His job was only to transport it. But now he realized something strange had happened even before he picked it up. Rohan asked him what he meant. Amir said he had seen a girl near the funeral home before leaving. She looked around nervously and spoke to someone in a low voice. She seemed stressed, but Amir had not paid attention because he thought she was just a visitor. Now he suspected she had something to do with the situation. Rohan took in every detail. He felt the puzzle growing more complex. The quiet road, the nervous driver, the sound from inside the coffin, the unknown girl, the speeding hearse, and the uncertainty surrounding the pickup location all created a picture that needed careful understanding. He refocused on the coffin. The shape inside moved slightly again, not sharp or sudden, but enough to show that someone inside was shifting. Rohan's instincts told him they were dealing with a person, not an object. He gently opened the lid wider. Inside the coffin lay a young woman. Her eyes were closed, and her breathing was slow but steady. She looked tired, not harmed. Her hands rested near her sides, and she wore simple clothes rather than anything ceremonial. Something about her peaceful expression did not match the unusual situation. Rohan did not touch her. He stepped back and observed. Amir covered his mouth with his hand, clearly shocked. He had not known for sure who or what was inside. And now, the truth left him speechless. The woman's eyes opened slowly when she sensed movement above her. She blinked a few times, adjusting to the light. Then she saw Rohan standing there. There was no fear in her eyes, only confusion and a hint of embarrassment. She asked where she was. Her voice was soft, as if she had just woken from a long nap. Rohan answered calmly, telling her she was inside a hearse on the roadside. Amir stood nearby, looking unsure of what to say. The woman pushed herself up slowly. Using her elbows for support, she explained in a slow, steady voice that she was not in danger. Her name was Zara. She said she was part of a small performance group that practiced escape acts. She had volunteered to try a new routine inside a coffin, but something had gone wrong while preparing. She had fallen asleep inside by accident, and when she woke up earlier, the hearse was already moving fast. She did not want to scare the driver, so she stayed quiet and waited. Rohan listened carefully. Her explanation was unusual, but her calmness showed she was telling the truth. Amir looked relieved, but still shaken. He apologized repeatedly for speeding and said he had no idea she was in the coffin alive. Rohan told them both to step out of the vehicle, so he could understand the entire picture clearly. Zara climbed out slowly, stretching her arms after being in a confined space for so long. The night did not feel heavy anymore. The tension that had filled the air earlier began to fade as the truth settled. But Rohan still felt that this situation held more secrets. Not harmful secrets, but surprising ones. He took a deep breath, preparing to ask more questions. The night was far from over, and the mystery had only started unfolding. The quiet night wrapped around the three of them as they stood beside the hearse. The highway stretched endlessly in both directions, glowing faintly under scattered streetlights. Rohan felt the cool air move across his face as he observed Zara and Amir. The situation had calmed a little, but something in his mind stayed alert. He sensed that there were still missing details, pieces of the puzzle that had not been revealed yet. Zara sat on the edge of the hearse, gently rubbing her wrists. Being inside a closed coffin for so long had left her muscles tense. Amir stood a few steps away, his shoulders still heavy with worry and relief mixed together. He glanced at Zara from time to time, as if making sure she was truly all right. Rohan crossed his arms and waited for the two to settle. Once Zara looked ready to speak, he took a step forward and asked her to explain everything again, slowly and clearly. He wanted to make sure there was no misunderstanding. Zara nodded and took a deep breath. She said she belonged to a small group that performed escape-style acts at events. They practiced different techniques using boxes, ropes, chambers, and sometimes even special props, like a stage coffin. She had volunteered to try a new routine inside a safe practice coffin. The group wanted to test how long a person could remain calm while inside, and they wanted feedback about the comfort level. Rohan listened carefully, noting every detail. Zara said the coffin she was in earlier was supposed to stay inside the training room, not inside a real hearse. She believed someone at the funeral home must have confused the practice coffin with the prepared one meant for delivery. Everything happened so quickly that she did not get a chance to explain. Before the hearse door closed and locked, Rohan looked at Amir. Amir lowered his head and admitted, again, that he had been told the coffin was ready for transport. He had assumed everything was correct. The staff who handed it to him had seemed calm. He did not see any reason to check inside. Now he realized how complicated the mistake had become. Zara continued speaking. When the hearse started moving, she tried knocking gently, thinking Amir might hear her. But the sounds were too soft, and the road noise drowned out everything. She feared he might panic if she created loud noises, so she stayed quiet. Hoping the journey would not be long, Rohan thought about the small thump he had heard earlier. That sound had been the most important clue. Without it, he might never have opened the coffin. He looked at the hearse again and walked closer to it. He leaned his ear near the open back door, listening for any remaining odd sounds. The interior stayed silent. He turned back to Zara and Amir. He asked Zara to describe the moment right before the hearse left. She paused and closed her eyes briefly to remember. She said she heard someone walking around the training area. She thought it was another member of the group, but she never saw their face clearly. She remembered hearing a short conversation somewhere outside the room, but the voices were distant, so she did not understand any words. This detail made Rohan think more deeply. He asked her to describe the tone of the conversation, even if she could not remember the words. Zara said the voices did not sound angry or rushed. They sounded normal, maybe even relaxed. But she remembered hearing a soft click that did not match anything in the training room. A click that sounded like the latch of a different door. Rohan stood still, thinking through her description. A soft click near a training room could mean someone opened or closed a door. But it could also mean a small mistake or a distraction caused someone to grab the wrong coffin. There was no sign of harmful intention. But something about the situation felt unusual enough for him to look deeper. He asked Amir to describe the person who gave him the coffin. Amir said it was a staff member from the funeral home, a man he had seen several times. He had never noticed anything odd about him. The man handed him the papers and the coffin, and then hurried away to attend to other tasks. Amir said he did not feel suspicious at the time. Everything seemed routine. Rohan nodded, taking in every detail. He looked at both of them and asked if either remembered seeing someone else around the funeral home earlier. Zara said she had seen a girl talking to someone outside the building before she entered with her group. She could not see her face clearly, but the girl seemed nervous as she spoke. She kept glancing around as if watching for someone. Amir confirmed he had also seen a girl near the entrance when he first arrived. She walked away quickly when he parked the hearse. The girl now added a new layer of mystery. Rohan wondered if she had been related to the mistake, or if she was there for something unrelated. He could not jump to conclusions, but he made a mental note to look into it later. Zara shifted slightly on the edge of the hearse and said she had begun to feel uneasy inside the coffin when the hearse picked up speed. She felt the movement become sharp, and she feared Amir might be struggling with something. Amir lowered his head again and admitted that he had panicked when he heard faint sounds from the back. He had tried to ignore them, telling himself it must be the road or the equipment. His fear of stopping on a dark road had made him speed up instead of slowing down. Rohan understood that fear could make even simple situations complicated. He told Amir that next time he must stay calm and follow proper safety procedures, even if he felt unsure. Amir nodded, accepting the advice. The wind picked up slightly, moving the trees nearby. The night air carried a faint, earthy scent as Rohan stepped away from the hearse and walked a short distance down the road. He looked at the dark horizon and let the surroundings tell their quiet story. He always believed that silence sometimes revealed more than words. He wanted to make sure he did not overlook anything. After a moment, he returned to Zara and Amir. The two were seated on the small metal step at the back of the hearse, waiting for Rohan to decide the next steps. Rohan stood in front of them and asked Zara if she had any idea why the girl she saw earlier had looked nervous. Zara said she could not guess. She simply remembered the girl holding her hands close to her chest, as if hiding something small or protecting something important. This detail caught Rohan's attention. He asked Amir if he had noticed similar behavior. Amir said he only saw the girl standing near the entrance, talking to someone quickly before leaving. Amir did not think much of it at the time. Rohan rubbed his chin slowly and began forming theories in his mind. Maybe the girl was connected to the performance group. Maybe she was connected to the funeral home. Maybe she had nothing to do with the situation. But her nervous behavior created a clue that Rohan could not ignore. He asked Zara if she had any idea who might have mistakenly moved the practice coffin. She said the training group was small but often visited different spaces. They borrowed rooms in community halls, event buildings, and sometimes near funeral homes when the interior spaces were available. Many different people walked in and out, so accidents could easily happen, Rohan agreed. Mistakes happened all the time, but mistakes did not explain everything. He felt there was an extra piece missing. A piece that linked the details together to understand the story better. He asked Zara to walk him through her entire schedule that day. From the moment she arrived at the training area to the moment she woke up inside the moving hearse. Zara took her time and explained everything step by step. Her group had received the practice coffin earlier that morning. They inspected it, tested the hinges, and prepared their routine. Zara volunteered to be the one who stayed inside the coffin so the others could watch the reaction of the audience during the act. They wanted to measure timing, lighting, and comfort levels. She said she lay inside the coffin for practice, breathing slowly and staying calm. She waited for the lid to open during the test, but instead, she heard unfamiliar footsteps. Then the lid was closed again. She wanted to ask what was happening, but she heard voices outside. She did not want to interrupt, thinking maybe the group was adjusting something. Later, she felt the coffin being lifted and moved. She thought her group was relocating it for another part of the test. She felt it being placed inside something, but she did not know it was a hearse. Her voice stayed steady as she spoke. She did not show anger or fear, only a sense of confusion and a touch of embarrassment. She admitted she had fallen asleep at one point because the training had tired her. Rohan appreciated her honesty. He turned to Amir again and asked him to recall every small detail about picking up the coffin. Amir said he had found it prepared behind the building near the loading area. The staff member there had waved him over and given him the necessary papers. The papers looked normal. He had placed the coffin inside the hearse, locked the door, and started driving. Everything seemed simple at the time. Rohan asked him to describe the staff member. Amir said the man looked like he always did, calm and professional. He did not seem hurried. He spoke in a steady tone. He did not show any sign that something unusual was happening. Rohan sighed quietly as he connected each detail. They all described normal actions, normal tasks, normal movements. Yet the outcome was far from normal. Mistakes rarely created such unusual results, unless separate events crossed paths unexpectedly. He looked at the hearse once more. The polished wood coffin shimmered faintly under the streetlight. Officer Mark drove toward the old community hall with a mind full of questions that felt heavier with every passing minute. The evening sky had turned a dusty orange, and the soft breeze carried the scent of trees and empty roads. The town was quiet, almost too quiet. He felt as if everyone around him knew a secret that he had only touched at the surface. Every turn brought him closer to the truth. Yet every thought made him more unsure of what he might face. The strange file from the morgue was on the seat next to him. Mark glanced at it again during a stoplight. The note from the doctor was short but left him unsettled. The doctor had said that the body in the coffin did not seem like a normal human body, and that he feared something was very wrong. The words echoed in Mark's head like a soft alarm that refused to stop ringing when he reached the community hall. He parked his car outside and stepped out carefully. The building looked old but tidy. The wooden boards on the walls were pale from years of sunlight, and the windows were dark since no event was happening inside. The stillness around the place made the setting peaceful, yet the reason for his visit removed any comfort from the air. Mark walked up the steps and knocked on the large wooden door. The sound echoed inside the empty hall. A moment later, the door opened, and an older man stepped out. He looked serious but calm, with white hair combed back and deep lines on his face. His name was Mr. Darrell, the manager of the hall. He greeted Mark with a polite nod, though his eyes quickly shifted with worry. Mark introduced himself and explained why he had come. Mr. Darrell listened with full attention and asked him to come inside. As they walked through the hall, Mark noticed how quiet it was. The wide room, usually filled with groups and events, now felt like a hollow shell. Chairs were stacked neatly, and a faint scent of cleaning liquid filled the air. The lights above flickered slightly, adding a strange tone to the already tense atmosphere. Once they reached a smaller room near the back, Mr. Darrell stopped and turned to Mark. He spoke in a slow, thoughtful voice. He said he had heard stories about unusual events happening in the area recently. At first he dismissed them as rumors, but now the situation sounded more real than he ever imagined. Mark could see the man's hands shaking slightly. It was clear he had something important to tell. Mr. Darrell explained that 2 days earlier, He had seen a man carrying a large covered box into the hall late in the evening. The man had said he needed a quiet place for a short time. He had paid in cash and did not leave any personal information. At the time, nothing seemed wrong, so he allowed the man inside. But when he returned the next morning to inspect the hall, the box was gone, and there were marks on the floor like something heavy had been dragged across it. Mark listened closely. Trying to match the details with the hearse, he stopped on the road. The dragging marks, the man's nervous behavior, the empty coffin, and the strange body, all connected in a way that made his stomach twist. He asked Mr. Darrell if he knew where the man had come from, or where he might have gone. Mr. Darrell shook his head slowly. He seemed worried, as if he feared he had allowed something dangerous to pass through the hall without knowing it. Mark's next step was to inspect the room, where the box had been kept. He walked inside and immediately noticed faint scratches on the floor, forming a long, straight line toward the exit door. He crouched down, ran his hand along the marks, and realized they were recent. The wood was slightly scraped, showing lighter color underneath. That meant whatever had been dragged was heavy and had moved recently, not far from the marks. Else Mark spotted a small, torn piece of cloth stuck under a table leg. He picked it up and studied it. The fabric was thick and rough, like something from a uniform or work coat. His mind began to sort the clues. Someone had hidden something in the hall, then moved it away in a hurry. The same person must be connected with the hearse driver, whose behavior still remained strange in his mind. Mark asked Mr. Darrell more questions about the man who had rented the hall. The older man described him as quiet, tense, and constantly looking over his shoulder. He said the man kept his hands in his pockets the entire time and avoided eye contact. He also remembered that the man's shoes were wet, even though the weather had been dry that evening. This detail bothered Mark. Wet shoes meant he had come from somewhere damp, possibly near the old river path or the abandoned factory where water collected on the ground. Mark thanked Mr. Darrell for the information and stepped outside the hall again. The air had cooled, and the sky was slowly turning dark. Street lights flickered on one by one. The shadows around the hall grew longer, stretching across the pavement like fingers reaching outward. Mark felt the pressure of time. He needed to find the man before something worse happened. As he walked back to his car, his phone rang. It was the doctor from the morgue. His voice sounded even more worried now. He said the body that came from the coffin had shown strange reactions when the staff tried to examine it. According to him, the skin of the body was unusually firm, as if it had stiffened far earlier than normal. Certain features on the face had not matched the record of the person listed on the form. The doctor had asked Mark if there was any chance the body had been switched. Mark froze for a moment. His mind rushed through the events. The nervous driver, the empty coffin, the dragging marks, the secretive man in the hall, the strange body at the morgue. Everything pointed toward one disturbing thought. Someone had moved a body from one place to another, but perhaps the body in the coffin was not the person it was supposed to be. Mark told the doctor to hold the examination and wait for him. He ended the call and sat in his car for a moment, trying to think clearly. He looked around the quiet street and felt the weight of the situation sitting on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. Something was happening in the town that no one expected, and he was standing in the middle of it. He drove to the edge of the town where the road split into 3 paths. One path led to a quiet residential area, another led to the river route, and the last one led to the abandoned factory. Mark studied the roads carefully. The river path was narrow and surrounded by trees. It was not a place where someone would easily carry something heavy, unless they wanted to stay hidden. The house area did not seem suspicious because anyone moving a large box there would be noticed. The abandoned factory, however, was far from the town center and often empty. Mark headed toward the factory. The road was uneven, and the wind grew colder as he drove. The factory appeared in the distance like a giant shadow against the dimming sky. Broken windows reflected the last bit of daylight, and rusted metal structures stood silently like forgotten towers. He parked his car a few meters away and stepped out quietly. The area around the factory was completely silent, except for the sound of leaves rustling in the breeze. He walked toward the entrance slowly, his hand hovering near his holster, not out of fear, but out of caution. He did not know who was inside or what he would find. As he crossed the yard, he noticed fresh footprints in the dust. They led toward a side door. Mark followed the prints and stopped when he reached the door. It was slightly open. A faint light glowed from inside. Mark pushed the door open gently and stepped into the factory. The smell of old steel and damp air filled the room. The light was coming from a small lamp placed on the floor. Next to it was the large box that matched Mr. Darrell's description. Mark felt his pulse rise. He approached the box slowly, looking around the room to make sure he was alone. As he got closer, he saw that the lid of the box had been pried open. Inside was a long sheet, folded neatly. The box was empty. Whoever had used it had taken whatever was inside and moved it again. That was when Mark heard a soft sound behind him. He turned quickly, and his eyes narrowed. Someone was standing in the shadows, watching him silently. Mark steadied himself. The truth was close. Too close. And as he faced the figure, he knew the mystery was far from over. Mark stood completely still as the figure stepped out of the shadows. The light from the small lamp touched the person's face slowly, revealing a man with tired eyes and a pale expression. He looked like someone who had not slept for days. His clothes were wrinkled and his hands shook, slightly as if he was carrying a heavy secret that weighed on his heart and mind. The man raised his hands to show he had no weapon. He spoke with a quiet voice. He said his name was Neil. Mark remembered that the hearse driver had mentioned that name when he nervously tried to explain why he was transporting the coffin at high speed. Now the missing piece of the puzzle stood right in front of him. Mark asked Neil why he was hiding in the factory and why he had moved a long box through the community hall 2 nights earlier. Neil took a slow breath and leaned against one of the old metal beams, as if he needed support before speaking. His face showed fear, regret, and confusion all at once. Neil began telling the truth he had been carrying alone. He explained that he had been hired by a man named Ross, the same man who had rented the hall. Ross had asked him to help move a body from one place to another because he wanted a quiet and private burial. At first, Neil agreed because he believed it was something simple. But as soon as he saw the box and the sheet covering the body, he sensed something was wrong. Ross behaved coldly and avoided all questions. He acted as if he was being watched. He kept repeating that the process must be done quietly and without attention. Neil felt uneasy, but he continued because he had already taken the job. The money offered was more than usual, and he wanted to help his family who needed it at the time. Neil continued speaking, and the more he shared, the more Mark felt a strange mix of worry and curiosity rising inside him. Neil said that after they placed the body inside the coffin at the hall, Ross suddenly told him to drive straight through the night and to avoid main roads. When Neil asked why, Ross simply answered that there were people who must not find the body. His answer did not make sense, but his intense seriousness made Neil follow his instructions. But then something strange happened. As Neil drove, he heard soft movements inside the coffin. At first, he thought it was only his imagination. But when he heard it again, he panicked. He pulled over, stepped out of the hearse, and walked around it several times, trying to calm himself. When he opened the door of the vehicle again, the sound had stopped. He convinced himself that he was stressed. In hearing things, he continued driving until the moment Mark stopped him on the road. At that moment, Neil felt a strong wave of fear because he knew Mark would open the coffin. He knew something about the entire situation was wrong, but he never imagined the coffin would be empty. When Mark discovered the empty coffin, Neil felt his legs weaken because he could not explain what had happened. He did not understand if Ross had opened it before they began the journey or if the thing inside had moved on its own. Mark listened closely, his eyes steady. He felt sympathy for Neil, who looked like a man trapped in a situation he never wanted. But he also felt a deeper concern because Neil's story meant someone else was still out there carrying something dangerous or something unknown. Mark asked Neil what happened after he ran from the roadside. Neil explained that he had gone to the factory because Ross had told him in the past that if anything went wrong, he must return to this place and wait. Ross had called it a safe space, a place where no one would disturb him. Neil only came because he was afraid and did not know what else to do. Mark asked where Ross was now. Neil shook his head with uncertainty. He said Ross had called him once after the roadside incident. His voice was shaky and low. Ross told him that the body must remain hidden and that he should stay inside the factory at all costs. He also warned him not to contact anyone else. Mark knew he had to find Ross. Every clue pointed toward Ross, being at the center of this strange situation. The dragging marks at the hall, the torn cloth, the empty coffin, the body with mismatched details at the morgue, and the secretive behavior all connected to Ross. Before Mark could ask another question, a loud, metallic sound echoed from the far corner of the factory. Both men turned sharply. The sound was like something falling or someone bumping into a metal frame. Mark signaled Neil to stay behind him. He moved forward slowly, careful with each step. The factory interior was dark and wide. With tall shadows cast by the old machines, Mark reached the corner and found a small door hanging loosely from its hinges. It appeared someone had opened it in a hurry, perhaps recently. Dust on the floor was disturbed, showing footprints leading down a narrow hallway. The fear in Neil's eyes grew stronger. He whispered that Ross had gone deeper into the building. Mark decided they needed to follow. Neil walked behind him, moving carefully. The hallway was dimly lit by small cracks in the ceiling, where thin strips of moonlight leaked in. It was quiet, but each step they took echoed softly through the corridor. They reached another room inside the factory. This room was small and almost empty except for a table, a stack of papers, and a single suitcase. Mark opened the suitcase carefully. Inside, he found documents, old photos, and a sealed envelope. He took out the envelope and opened it. Inside were handwritten notes from Ross. The notes described his fear that someone was after him because of the body he had been keeping for research. Ross believed that the body belonged to a person who had a rare medical condition, and he was trying to study it. But he had kept it hidden for years, moving it from place to place so no one would discover it. The story became clearer. Ross had kept the body in secret. When pressure increased, he had decided to move it again. He had asked Neil to help him without explaining the whole truth. But something happened during the move. Someone else must have opened the box, or Ross had lost control of the situation. Mark placed the notes down and turned to Neil. Before he could speak, they heard another sound behind them. This time it was soft and slow, like breathing. Mark stepped forward and shined his light toward the sound. Ross was sitting on the floor near a stack of crates. His back was against the wall, and he looked exhausted. His face was pale, and his eyes were swollen from lack of sleep. He looked up at Mark and Neil with a tired expression. There was no anger or danger in his eyes, only deep regret and fear. Ross explained that he had never meant to cause trouble. He had tried to protect the body because he believed the person had a unique condition that needed more study. He was afraid authorities would take it away, so he moved it secretly. But when he realized something had changed and the body no longer looked the way it did before, he panicked. He thought someone else had interfered with it, and that scared him more than anything. Mark asked about the missing body. Ross said he did not know where it had gone. He believed it had been moved before the coffin was taken to the hall. Ross admitted he suspected someone had been watching him and had taken the body without leaving any trace. He did not tell Neil because he feared Neil would refuse to help him if he knew the truth. Mark realized that the case was far bigger than he expected. It involved secrecy, fear, misunderstanding, and mistakes. There was no danger inside the factory now. It was only 3 men trying to understand what had gone wrong. Mark contacted his team and reported everything. When backup arrived, Ross and Neil were taken for questioning, but Mark made sure they were treated fairly. Neither of them had intended harm. They were caught in a situation that had grown beyond their control. The body would need to be found. But Mark felt certain that with enough investigation, the truth would come forward. The coffin, the dragging marks, and the strange details at the morgue would all be part of a larger explanation waiting to be uncovered. As the sun rose the next morning, Mark stepped outside the factory. The sky was bright and calm. Birds were waking and filling the air with their simple morning songs. The peace of the new day felt like a soft reminder that every mystery, no matter how dark or confusing, eventually comes to light. Mark felt tired, but steady. He had followed the clues, protected the people involved, and kept the truth moving forward. He looked at the old factory one last time. The long night had changed the way he saw the town and the people in it, but it also reminded him that responsibility meant facing the unknown with patience and courage. With a deep breath, Mark walked toward his car. The road ahead was clear, and he was ready to continue his work. Knowing he had done everything he could to bring clarity to a long and confusing night,